get along with someone, put off something, call off an event, blow up, go off. These are some very common phrasal verbs we use regularly in English. And indeed, phrasal verbs with get, take, have, go, put are commonly taught in YouTube videos and, of course, in textbooks, in course books, and at school. In today's lesson, I want to share 12 slightly more unusual, weird and wonderful phrasal verbs with verbs that you wouldn't necessarily think of using, maybe even as verbs. So these phrasal verbs, although actually quite commonly used amongst native speakers, are perhaps some that we would less commonly teach. So if you do want to learn a few weird and wonderful phrasal verbs, then keep watching. Welcome back to Love English. I'm Leila, and today we're going to learn some phrasal verbs. Right, number 1, to plod. Now, I'm teaching you the verb before I teach you the phrasal verb. To plod is a way of walking, of moving. To walk taking slow steps, particularly as though your feet are quite heavy. Perhaps you might plod when you are walking up a hill, or when you're particularly tired, or when you're walking down a muddy path. We plodded through the muddy field. Now, when we talk about plodding along or plodding on, we're talking about making progress in a slow but steady pace. She's still plodding along with her homework. How are things going? Oh, you know, plodding along. So you're making progress, but in a slow, steady way. It's often a way of responding when someone asks how you are, what you're doing. You can just simply say, oh, you know, plodding on, plodding along, meaning moving forward in life, but nothing exciting particularly happening. So a lovely phrasal verb and a fantastic verb to talk about the way you might walk if you're tired with very heavy feet. Number 2, to mull. Mull. Now, mull is often used when we talk about mulling wine. So heating something up, making it warmer, stewing it almost. But when we talk about mulling something over, we're talking about thinking carefully, considering something before we perhaps make a decision. I really needed to mull over the job proposition. I really wasn't sure if it was the right thing for me. Number 3, to muster something up. To muster something up. Usually we refer to mustering up courage or energy to do something. It's when you create a feeling or quality in yourself because you need it in order to do something. She was so nervous when it came to taking the exam, but she mustered up the courage and she took that exam and she passed. Oh, I really don't think I can muster up the energy to go to the gym today. Pay attention. You muster something up, you muster the energy up, you muster the courage up in order to do something. So you need to and the infinitive there in that structure. She mustered up the courage to ask him out. Number 4, size. Now, when we talk about size, we're usually referring to an object, whether it's big or small or medium. But in this case, we are using it as a verb, a phrasal verb, to size something or somebody up. You could see the cats sizing each other up when we introduced them. Eventually, they got along. So, in this sentence, we are suggesting that they are looking, analysing each other. It essentially means to examine someone or something carefully, to understand them better. And of course, to see whether you trust them or not. The voters are still sizing up the presidential candidates. Number 5, a weird one, ham. Yes, usually referring to the meat of a pig, but in this case, we're talking about hamming something or it up. To perform or behave in a false way, especially in a way that is too obvious, really in order perhaps to make people laugh. It can be a slightly negative thing to do because it can come across as being very false or unnatural. Oh, she's always hamming it up for the boss to get attention and special mention in the meetings. Now, number 6, this is a verb you are familiar with, and it is, of course, normally a verb. To sniff. Yes, to sniff something out. To search for and discover something. Now, I'm not talking about sniffing for chocolate, no. We're talking about perhaps finding a job opportunity, or even the truth. His mother was always able to sniff out the truth. He couldn't tell her a lie even if he wanted to. She's great at sniffing out job opportunities. She found one just last week. Now, number 7, weed. A weed is normally a horrible flower that we don't want in the garden. It's not a flower. It's like a plant or some kind of, I don't know, whatever, that grows in the garden that essentially might kill or damage other plants or flowers around. You can tell I'm not a gardener. So, but if we are trying to weed something out, then we're trying to get rid of unwanted things or people perhaps in a group. So think about weeding the garden. You want to remove the weeds so that you can have the lovely flowers and plants. With weed something out, you want to remove something because it is not beneficial to the situation. In the first round of interviews, we wanted to weed out the weaker candidates. The business plan looks great, but I think there's a few things we could weed out here. Number 8, to play something down. To play something down. To make something seem less important or bad than it really is. The military spokesperson tried to play down the seriousness of the event so as to not cause concern. Oh, sorry, number 9, zone out. To zone out means that you lose focus or concentration for a short period of time, a little bit like daydreaming. To stop paying attention or seeing what's going on around you for a short period of time. It could be that you were distracted, tired, or you are simply a daydreamer. When men talk about football, I just zone out. It's probably the same for you guys when we talk about shoes. Number 10, dish. Dish, usually referring in a formal way to a plate or a meal that's provided, a dish that you cook. In this case, we are talking about dishing something out. Now, we're not literally dishing out the food, but rather to give or say something to someone without thinking about it particularly carefully. A good doctor listens to their patient rather than simply dishing out the drugs. He's mad at me for teasing him. He can dish it out, but he can't take it. Number 11, if someone is too serious, if they seem like they're taking life too seriously or a particular situation, you could tell them, come on, lighten up. Meaning, try to relax and take things a little less seriously. Oh, lighten up, I was only joking. She has been working way too hard. I really think she needs to lighten up and take a bit of a break. Number 12, a really weird one, fawn. Fawn. Now, I think a fawn is a baby deer. I should Google that. Yes, a young deer in its first year. Thank you very much. So, we're not talking about deers at all here. The phrasal verb is to fawn over. So we're using this noun as a verb in a very particular context. To praise someone too much and give them attention that's not really very sincere, honest. So for example, he's always fawning over the teacher in hopes of getting better grades. I really hate waiters that fawn over you in the hope of getting more tips. And there we have it, 12 rather weird and wonderful and slightly unusual phrasal verbs that I wonder, have any of you actually ever heard them before? They're not phrasal verbs that I would commonly teach, and although they're probably less commonly used, I think that I would use them. I do use them in day-to-day English, but probably not as much as phrasal verbs like get along or, I don't know, put off, like I gave you examples at the beginning of the lesson. So, if any of these phrasal verbs are new for you, then please do take them, write some sentences, and actually comment below. Try using some of these phrasal verbs, and remember my key tip, make sure that you personalize them. Give them a context. Think about a situation where you felt someone was fawning over you, or where you needed to sniff out a job, or I don't know, the truth. Use some examples that are relevant to your life so that the phrasal verbs become a part of your permanent vocabulary range. And there we have it, 12 phrasal verbs that I hope you will enjoy using, learning, and hopefully understanding in future. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, don't forget, there's plenty more where that came from.